This was the toughest slot because I had to leave out two guys that I really love and really respect from their times in the NFL. But one guy did it better in terms of both rushing and receiving than they did, Marshall Faulk. I had to put in Marshall Faulk at number 10 all time. He right now is 12th all time in rushing yards, but think about how incredible he was out of the backfield catching the ball. He is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, pass catcher running back, and so I had to put him in the top 10. My number 9 greatest running back ever, another guy that was unbelievable out of the backfield, and that is LaDainian Tomlinson. Tomlinson could be the workhorse running back, and Tomlinson could be the best receiver on the field. He is number 7 all-time in rushing yards with more than 13,000. Adrian Peterson just passed him last night. But again, LDT, one of the best pass-catching running backs, if not the best ever. My number 8 all-time running back is that man we saw last night, Adrian Peterson. A guy that ran with the size and the power and the fury that guys from a previous generation did. AP is right now 6th all-time in rushing. AP will end up passing Curtis Martin, who's about 400 yards ahead of him. He probably won't get to Frank Gore, and he probably won't get beyond that. But look, if Adrian Peterson ends up as the 5th all-time leading rusher upon his retirement, what a career he has been. None of this takes into account their off-the-field stuff, because eventually we'll get to a guy that had some really bad off-the-field stuff, and Adrian Peterson had some of his. But just in terms of sheer running back, Adrian Peterson's my number 8 running back ever. Number 7, the Tyler Rose, Earl Campbell. The first ever bulldozer demolition. I don't want to line up against him in the whole running back. And while now all these big historical offensive numbers have pushed him down the list, when he retired, Earl Campbell was an obvious Hall of Famer and a guy that had the brutality of the game at that time in the 70s and early 80s, and the amount of wear and tear on his body not taking its toll, he could have played much longer. To me, Earl Campbell is easily a top 10 running back ever. I put him on my list at number 7. Number 6, one of the greatest breakaway backs ever. A guy that ran with a style all to his own and has the all-time single-season rushing record at 2105, Eric Dickerson. Dickerson's 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88 are arguably the greatest 6 seasons outside of a guy named Jim Brown that any running back has ever had. What he did in those years in 16 games is staggering. Eric Dickerson is my number 6 running back of all time. Currently, he's number 9 of the all-time rushing list. Number 5 is the guy that actually is the all-time leading rusher, Emmitt Smith. Emmitt is benefited hugely by playing behind the greatest offensive line of his generation, of playing for a team that was thoroughly dominant, and so defenses had to respect Aikman and Irvin and Harper. But look, Emmitt did it for a really long time, stayed remarkably healthy, was remarkably productive. Again, he played behind an unbelievable offensive line, the Great Wall of Dallas. But Emmitt is a top 5 running back all time. I'd put him at number 5. Number 4, talking about a guy that had bad off-the-field stuff. We don't think of him as the all-time great and all-time great because of just how ugly his post-career has been since 1994, but it's O.J. Simpson. O.J. was the only thing on that offense. The only thing any defense had to worry about with the Buffalo Bills of the 70s was O.J. Simpson. And this is a guy that broke the 2,000-yard barrier in 14 games, when that was absolutely insane. We, again, don't think about O.J. all time as one of these greats because O.J.'s been so ugly in his post-career, but O.J. Simpson's ability all time is a top 4 running back ever. I have him at number 4. Number 3, the GOAT, Barry Sanders. And look, I'd love to put him at 1 or number 2, but Barry, the one thing he didn't do great was he didn't block great. and he wasn't great catching balls out of the backfield. But in terms of making something out of nothing and being one of the most brilliant running backs to watch, he was my favorite running back to watch all time, and I don't think anybody's ever going to top him. Barry is my number 3 and could have been higher had he not retired early. Number 2, the guy that retired as the number 1 rusher of all time and still remains at number 2 on the all-time rushing list, and that's Walter Payton. Sweetness. Walter Payton is the greatest all-around back ever. Walter Payton was unbelievable on the ground, as evidenced by his 16,000 yards rushing. But he's also amazing out of the backfield, a great pass catcher. He was also an unbelievable blocker. People forget that Walter Payton, Sweetness, was a great blocker, and he could throw the football. The Bears oftentimes utilized him to throw halfback options and was a really good passer. And again, in the late 70s and early 80s, up until the Bears get McMahon, there is no threat of throwing the football, so defenses are completely locked in on him. And Walter Payton once ran for 275 yards in a game. 275. The number 1 running back of all time, Jim Brown. He's the GOAT. What he did in 9 seasons is ridiculous. And right now, Jim Brown's only 11th on the all-time rushing list. But Jim Brown in 9 seasons ran for 12,000 yards in short seasons. I mean, this was not 16-game schedules. He did this in 12-game seasons. Jim Brown played the first half of his career with 12 games and then the second half at 14 games and still ran for 12,000 yards in 9 years. Here's his years that he led the league in rushing. 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 63, 64, 65. His final season in 65, he ran for 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns and retired. Had Jim Brown just played another 3 seasons or so, his numbers would be absolutely insane. Jim Brown is the greatest running back of all time. Watching AP last night, I had to think about my top 10 running backs ever. Those are them.